The Willow Glen Estates in northern Illinois didn't look very different from the half-dozen other suburban communities that dotted the edges of Chicago's sprawl. Its rows of well-maintained ranch houses, Cape Cods, and a scattering of two-story colonials were set along winding roads with gentle curves and minimal traffic. Manicured lawns boasted ornamental maples, hydrangea bushes, and meticulously trimmed hedges, partially thanks to the local homeowners association, HOA. Residents joked that one could practically bounce a quarter off any front lawn, so uniformly neat were the grass blades. At the heart of Willow Glen Estates, flanked by two symmetrical courtyards, stood a senior housing block. Although smaller than the standard neighborhood homes, these one-story units were built in a cozy horseshoe shape around a broad, communal courtyard. Ornamental walkways crisscrossed that central patch, weaving between flower beds, wooden benches, and even a small koi pond. For the older residents, this courtyard was a pocket of quiet joy, somewhere to stroll with canes or walkers, read in the sunshine, or chat amiably with neighbors in the mild afternoons. Overseeing everything from trash schedules to landscaping specs was the Willow Glen HOA, a body of 5 official board members and a handful of volunteer liaisons. Officially, the HOA's mission was to keep the neighborhood's beauty and safety up to par. However, behind its helpful facade lurked a figure whose personal crusades frequently stirred tension. Her given name was Miriam Burnley, but after 2 years of her bossy, holier-than-thou approach, neighbors had quietly christened her with a more apt moniker, Karen. Karen was in her mid-50s, divorced, and living alone in a spotless ranch house on the south side of Willow Glen. She had a sharply angled bob haircut, always wore pressed khaki pants, and carried a thick binder stuffed with HOA bylaws. She called herself the Senior Community Liaison, but most seniors suspected she'd taken that title simply to police them more aggressively. Indeed, she was known for leaving scolding notes on doorsteps. Please remove wind chimes. Noise pollution. Your deck furniture color is non-compliant. No potted plants in the walkway. If anyone dared question her authority, she'd point to the binder and snap. It's in the rules, I assure you. Most neighbors tried, half-heartedly, to appease her. After all, Willow Glen was otherwise a lovely place to live. But within the senior block, frustration simmered. They saw Karen's intrusive ways as an assault on their freedom. She fixated on minor offenses, ignoring that many seniors needed small modifications. Railings, wheelchair ramps, even oxygen tank lines. Her notion of uniform beauty left little room for compassionate exceptions. Amid that growing friction, a new worry emerged. A stray dog had been spotted prowling the outer edges of the neighborhood. Some described it as a large, scraggly mutt with a menacing stare. Others swore it was part pit bull, part unknown breed, possibly abandoned by previous owners. Occasionally, residents heard it snarling late at night, rummaging in trash bins or chasing squirrels. By itself, this dog had no direct tie to Karen, at least not yet. But circumstances would soon create an alarming intersection between the dog's presence and Karen's meddlesome crusade. And it would target, most dangerously, the heart of that quiet senior courtyard that so many cherished. On a crisp April morning, Karen ambled through the senior courtyard, her click-heeled loafers tapping the flagstone walkway. She liked to do this inspection once or twice a week, claiming it was to ensure the grounds remained tidy. In truth, her visits rarely uncovered real problems, but she often invented small infractions. Your garden gnome is out of regulation. This bench color doesn't match the authorized palette, etc. Her presence put many seniors on edge. One such resident, Mildred Hawks, was tending to a row of potted petunias on her small patio. Spotting Karen approaching with her usual pinched expression, Mildred forced a polite smile. "Good morning, Miriam," she greeted, using Karen's real name, knowing full well Karen disliked that casual address. Karen responded with a curt nod. "Good morning, Mrs. Hawks. I see your potted flowers are somewhat large. Are you sure they don't block the walkway?" Mildred, a petite widow with silver hair, stiffened. "They're well within my designated space. I haven't had complaints from neighbors." Karen pursed her lips. We have to keep corridors entirely clear. I'll make a note to verify compliance." Then she stepped around the pots and continued. Moments later, Karen spied Walter Pierce, an 80-year-old retired teacher, taking slow steps with a cane across the courtyard. Walter nodded a friendly hello, but Karen ignored him, her gaze fixed on some imaginary offense. She found none. Instead, she noticed how the seniors seemed comfortable, perhaps too comfortable in her eyes. "Shouldn't they be more respectful of my authority?" A small voice in her mind whispered. She felt a simmering annoyance that these older folks often resisted or questioned her. In truth, Karen had grown increasingly irritated with the seniors' courtyard. She believed it was cluttered with personal touches, benches, bird feeders, potted herbs. She viewed it as an eyesore, especially compared to the uniform front lawns she had so successfully policed. The seniors, though polite, did not automatically obey her every suggestion. Some even politely told her that small personal touches were essential for their sense of well-being. That tension weighed on Karen. She began fantasizing about ways to push these residents to scale back their excess, or at least respect the HOA rules without question. Her mind wandered to drastic solutions, like banning certain items or restricting access to the courtyard. But the board had shown little appetite for her more extreme proposals, wanting to keep the seniors happy. It was in this unsettled mood that Karen heard rumors of a large, aggressive stray dog roaming the perimeter of Willow Glen. A kernel of an idea formed, shocking even to her own conscience at first. If that dog somehow got into the courtyard, it might scare these seniors enough to comply, or maybe even to vacate their cluttered space. Cruel? Perhaps, but she rationalized it as just letting nature run its course. She told herself, if the dog's there, they'll see they can't have all their little decorations or linger around so freely. Safety concerns will overshadow their silly personal touches. As the days passed, Karen mulled this twisted thought. She didn't own a dog herself, had no direct control over the stray. But if she could lure it or release it at a strategic moment, the seniors might be frightened enough to retreat indoors, or to remove their unsightly benches and garden extras for fear of being outside at all. The more she entertained this scheme, the more feasible it felt. She wanted to rid the courtyard of these older folks' personal touches to restore a uniform, proper look. She'd never stoop to physically harming someone, she told herself. She'd just introduce an element of fear, letting events play out on their own. No real guilt, right? Little did Karen realize how drastically this plan would backfire. Because unleashing a vicious dog into a courtyard primarily used by seniors would do more than cause fear. It would incite a wave of righteous anger and communal action that would overshadow any petty compliance matter. Over the following week, neighbors gossiped with growing unease about the stray dog's appearances at dusk and dawn. Its coat was patchy brown and gray, ribs faintly visible, and a glint of wild aggression shone in its eyes. A few times, people glimpsed it trotting along the sidewalks or rummaging through garbage cans left out too early. Some swore it had growled at them, though no direct attacks were confirmed. Animal control was notified, but the dog was elusive, slipping away whenever anyone tried to approach. They suggested residents avoid feeding it or leaving trash accessible. The Willow Glen Facebook group lit up with warnings. Careful, that dog seems vicious. Keep your pets and kids inside. Karen followed these rumors with heightened interest. She was thrilled each time someone reported the dog's aggression, viewing it as a potential instrument of her plan. The only question, how to get the dog into the seniors' courtyard at the right moment. Luring it with food might work, but she had to be stealthy. She couldn't risk being caught orchestrating such a stunt. Meanwhile, among the senior residents, the dog rumors added a layer of worry. People like Walter Pierce or Mildred Hawks recognized that their courtyard was normally a safe haven, fenced on 3 sides with only one wide gate to the street. That gate remained open for easy wheelchair or walker access, but if a large dog wanted to push through, it likely could. Some suggested the HOA might add a latch or a simple chain, but so far no action was taken. Karen soon discovered that the stray dog frequently prowled near the west edge of Willow Glen, close to a wooded stretch that led to the next subdivision. One evening, Karen took a drive in her small SUV and spotted the dog skulking near a drainage ditch. Heart pounding, she rolled down the window, gently tossed out a few scraps of chicken, then retreated to watch from a distance. The dog approached warily, scarfing the food. Over the next few days, she repeated this gesture, building a bizarre trust with the animal. She'd leave bits of meat or stale bread near the same ditch, letting the dog associate her presence with food. It was a disturbing alliance. Karen, an HOA busybody, secretly feeding a stray known to be aggressive. Yet each time, she felt a strange thrill. This could work, she mused. I'll coax it to follow me. Then, at the right time, I'll open the senior's courtyard gate and let fate do the rest. She rationalized that it was a natural occurrence, a stray dog wandering in, no direct crime on her part. But deep down, she knew she was planning something cruel, crossing moral lines she'd never openly admit. The day to act arrived sooner than expected. One afternoon, she overheard that the seniors planned a small courtyard gathering to celebrate Mildred Hawks's 75th birthday. They'd be outside around mid-afternoon, possibly enjoying cake and conversation. Perfect, Karen thought. If the dog wandered in at that time, it might cause enough panic to end the party, and maybe encourage them to stay inside permanently. With her twisted plan formed, she readied a bag of leftover meat scraps in her SUV, determined to see it through. On a sunny Wednesday in late April, Mildred Hawks's birthday celebration commenced around 2 p.m. About a dozen seniors gathered in the courtyard. They placed a small folding table with a cake, paper plates, and cups of lemonade. A light breeze rustled the newly bloomed azaleas. Walter Pierce sat on a bench near the koi pond, chatting with neighbors about old memories of teaching. Others ambled about or parked their walkers in a semicircle, enjoying the sunshine. Karen spent the morning driving to the wooded edge, feeding the stray dog bits of raw chicken. By now, it recognized her SUV and seemed willing to follow at a cautious distance. Karen carefully coaxed it, leading along back streets until they reached Willow Glen. Her pulse pounded, part fear, part giddy anticipation. She made sure to circle around so no one would see her with the dog. Eventually, she parked near a side alley. She got out, leaving a trail of meat scraps on the sidewalk, watching the dog creep closer. Then she quietly walked toward the senior's courtyard entrance, its black iron gate ajar for easy access. Hiding behind a tall hedge, she tossed a few final scraps inside the courtyard's gateway. The dog, hungry and emboldened, followed the smell. Step by step, it crossed the threshold. Karen glimpsed the seniors just 30 feet away, laughing over slices of cake. They hadn't noticed the dog yet. With her heart hammering, Karen retreated behind the hedge and hustled back to her SUV. She felt a shiver of excitement, and shame flood through her. Let happen, she thought. They'll be frightened. Then maybe they'll keep that courtyard clear in the future. The stray dog sniffed the ground, devouring the scraps. Then it looked up. The seniors turned, noticing the large animal. Some gasped. The dog let out a low growl, baring its teeth. Instantly, panic rippled through the group. Mildred Hawks froze, dropping her paper plate. Another woman shrieked softly. Walter Pierce, trembling, rose from the bench with difficulty, leaning on his cane. The dog advanced a few paces, snarling. A couple of braver souls tried to shoo it off, but it barked, snapping at them. Fearful that the animal might attack, the seniors began backing away. Some huddled near the far corner of the courtyard, while others rummaged for cell phones to call for help. One neighbor tried to distract the dog by tossing a piece of cake, but that only confused it momentarily, continuing its menacing stance. The mood shifted from a pleasant birthday party to a terrifying standoff. Karen lingered just out of sight, biting her lip. She heard raised voices, frantic calls of somebody do something. She almost wavered. This is going too far, a conscience twinge told her. But she reasoned that no real harm had occurred yet. If the dog truly attacked, maybe the seniors would run inside. That was the entire point, wasn't it? She didn't want them physically hurt, just frightened enough to yield. She told herself they'd lock themselves indoors soon, and the dog would eventually wander off. But the seniors didn't want to abandon each other. Walter, leaning heavily on his cane, tried guiding Mildred toward the main building door. The dog snarled, lunging forward a few steps. Suddenly, Teresa Glenn, another senior, mustered the courage to wave her arms and shout, "Shoo! Shoo!" trying to stand between the animal and her more vulnerable neighbors. The dog growled louder, hackles raised, torn between retreat and aggression. Moments later, a neighboring resident, Eric Lynn, a middle-aged father of two, heard the commotion from his backyard. He sprinted over, brandishing a broom. With careful, firm movements, he managed to corral the dog away from the crowd, driving it back toward the open gate. The dog eventually bolted out to the street, spooked by the swinging broom and rising shouts. The seniors collapsed in relief, some trembling, others nearly in tears. Teresa Glenn cradled Mildred, who was shaking from shock. An ambulance was called, not for injuries, but to check vital signs of a few who had been nearly overwhelmed by fright. Within minutes, the courtyard filled with concerned neighbors, police, and paramedics. "Is everyone okay? Where did that dog come from?" The swirling questions had no immediate answers. And Karen, from her vantage point, realized she'd orchestrated a true crisis. No turning back now, she thought grimly, retreating home. She'd only wanted them unsettled, not severely traumatized. But the gravity of what she'd done began to sink in. Seniors could have been severely injured, or worse. The consequences of this act would ripple far beyond her imagining, igniting a community uproar and a swift defensive response that would thwart her meddling once and for all. News of the Courtyard incident spread like wildfire through Willow Glen Estates. By evening, the neighborhood's Facebook group was ablaze with posts recounting the terrifying near attack on the seniors, some demanding immediate action. "We can't allow a vicious dog to roam. Let's find a solution to protect the elderly," wrote one concerned mother. Another posted, "My grandma nearly had a heart attack from fear." Animal control and local police had come out, but the dog was long gone, once again slipping back into the wooded perimeter. But the dog's mere presence wasn't the only cause of the uproar. Some neighbors began voicing suspicion that the dog's appearance in the courtyard wasn't random. Did someone let in on purpose? Was the gate closed or open? Eyewitnesses had observed how the dog almost seemed drawn inside. Teresa Glenn recalled glimpsing scraps of meat on the flagstones near the gate. Others chimed in. Could someone have enticed the dog? Unsettled by these allegations, the HOA board convened an emergency meeting via Zoom. Larry Danforth, the board president, listened somberly as seniors like Mildred Hawks, Walter Pierce, and Teresa Glenn recounted the day's terror. "We can't prove sabotage yet," Larry told them, "but it seems suspicious." The board agreed to add extra patrols from the local volunteer neighborhood watch, keep the gate closed when not in use, and consult a fencing company about reinforcing the courtyard entrance. They also planned to request a camera installation to monitor that gate area. Karen, who was part of the liaison group but not an official board member, sat silent on the Zoom call. She typed minimal comments in the chat, feigning shock. "We must keep our seniors safe," she wrote, hoping to deflect suspicion. She realized some might suspect her, given her vocal frustration with the courtyard's clutter. But thus far, no direct evidence pointed her way. Still, the flickers of guilt in her chest felt scorching. If they find out I lured the dog, I'm finished. Possibly even arrested. The next morning, a wave of visitors stopped by the senior block to show support. Younger residents delivered groceries, placed potted flowers, in a gesture of comfort, by doorways, or simply offered a friendly ear to the rattled seniors. The courtyard, once a place of quiet solace, now felt tainted by fear. Some older folks avoided it entirely, staying indoors. Others ventured out only in pairs or groups, scanning nervously for any sign of the stray dog. Among them, Eric Lynn, who had chased the dog away with a broom, was hailed as a hero. He humbly waved off the praise, but grew increasingly disturbed by the idea that someone might have orchestrated this. He noticed, too, that small lumps of raw meat lay in the walkway after the dog left, deliberately placed, it seemed. Convinced that the incident was no accident, Eric quietly confided in a few neighbors, including Mildred, that they should watch out for further sabotage. Karen, meanwhile, tried to lay low. She performed her usual compliance checks on other parts of the neighborhood, though she felt the seniors' gazes on her. Did they sense her role in the fiasco? She worried that if she seemed too supportive of new security measures, she might hamper her own goals of tidying up the courtyard. On the other hand, opposing them would stoke suspicion. Torn between wanting the seniors out of the courtyard and wanting to avoid being caught, she found herself paralyzed. But the community was already rallying beyond her control. The dog's intrusion had galvanized a protective spirit, and the seeds of a new, stronger security plan were taking root, a plan that would later be shaped into a robust, locked fence system that even a cunning saboteur couldn't easily bypass. As tension lingered, the HOA scheduled a special in-person meeting at the Willow Glen Community Center on a Saturday afternoon. Typically, these gatherings discussed mundane issues like lawn fertilization or pool hours. This time, the dog incident topped the agenda. Dozens of concerned residents filled the small auditorium, and a hush fell as Larry Danforth stood at the front with a microphone. "Thank you all for coming," Larry began. He looked graver than usual, adjusting his glasses. "We all know about the terrifying event in the senior courtyard. Our priority is to ensure it never happens again. That means improved security, specifically around that gate. We have some proposals, like a fully enclosed fence, possibly with coded locks." A ripple of approval passed through the crowd. The idea of a coded lock suggested a gate that unauthorized persons or animals couldn't simply push open. The seniors could be given the combination, allowing them easy wheelchair and walker access, while the general public or stray animals would be kept out. The question was, would the HOA fund such a project? Larry continued, "We've consulted a fencing company, Safe Glen Enclosures, who says we can add a tall fence extension and a locked gate. The gate can be automated or coded. This would preserve accessibility for those who live in the senior units or who have legitimate reasons to be there, but keep out strays. The cost is not trivial, but we do have emergency fund from the HOA reserve. I propose we vote on it." One board member, Ms. Connolly, nodded. Yes, this fence would create an enclosed courtyard, effectively ensuring no stray animal or uninvited individual can waltz in. She explained that the fence's design included a wide, push-bar door for fire safety, plus an electronic keypad for residents to enter a code and open the gate from outside. Inside, the door would open with a simple push, no code needed, to comply with emergency exit standards. The seniors in attendance, Walter, Mildred, Teresa, and others, voiced strong support. "We want to enjoy our courtyard without fear," Walter said in a trembling but determined voice. "A fence with coded locks sounds perfect." Then, from near the side, Karen cleared her throat. She wore her usual pastel sweater and an expression of forced concern. "I understand the fear over that dog incident," she said carefully, "but do we really want a fortress-like fence in the middle of Willow Glen? Our aesthetic has always been open green spaces. This fence might look obtrusive or cause real estate concerns. We must consider property values." Teresa Glenn responded sharply. "More than property values, we're worried about our lives, Ms. Burnley. I was nearly attacked, and I had to witness neighbors trembling in terror. If a fence stands between me and a vicious dog, it's worth it." Applause and murmurs of agreement rippled. Karen tried to maintain composure, but her lips thinned. She attempted one last angle. "But the cost? Maybe we could just keep the gate latched or keep watch. A locked fence might be an overreaction." Larry stepped in. "This is a matter of safety, Ms. Burnley. We have the funds. The residents support it. Unless we see a majority opposing it, the board intends to pass the motion." The meeting ended with a near-unanimous vote in favor of building the enclosed, pet-proof fence. Karen looked on, feeling her influence wane. She quietly seethed. All that meddling, undone by a single dog fiasco. She never dreamed the community would respond so decisively, funneling resources into a solution that would effectively secure the courtyard even more, making it the opposite of the cleared-out area she'd wanted. Nevertheless, the wheels were in motion. The next step was to finalize the fence design. If all went smoothly, It might be installed within weeks, turning the courtyard into a fortress against strays, and, ironically, making the seniors' hold on the space stronger than ever before. Karen's sabotage had backfired spectacularly. Within days, Safe Glen Enclosures sent a design proposal to the HOA board. Larry Danforth circulated it through the neighborhood email list, encouraging feedback. The plan featured a tall, wrought iron fence extension around the courtyard perimeter and a main gate with an electronic keypad on the outside. On the inside, a push-bar mechanism would let anyone exit quickly, vital for fire code compliance or medical emergencies. The entire gate would be wide enough to accommodate wheelchairs and mobility scooters, ensuring no one felt locked in or out. Residents, especially the seniors, responded enthusiastically. They liked that the design matched the existing black iron aesthetic of Willow Glen's front gates, retaining a clean, unobtrusive look. A small arch above the gate would bear the name Willow Glen Senior Courtyard, giving it a welcoming vibe. The coded lock required 4 digits. The plan was to distribute the code to the seniors and any caretaker or friend who frequently visited, updated periodically for security. Karen was the lone dissenting voice. She emailed the board listing potential drawbacks, cost overruns, aesthetic clash, complications for visitors who didn't know the code. But her arguments fell flat, overshadowed by the immediate memory of a vicious dog nearly attacking residents. The community's moral consensus was that no one's sense of style or convenience trumps safety. Even Ms. Connolly, once sympathetic to Karen's design concerns, pointed out that the fence was a small price to pay for peace of mind. Eager to start, the board fast-tracked the project. They scheduled construction for the following week. The seniors were overjoyed. Some chipped in extra funds to cover landscaping updates, ensuring the courtyard's flower beds would remain accessible. Volunteers from a younger portion of Willow Glen offered to help move heavy planters or rearrange benches during construction. The entire undertaking took on a communal spirit, neighbors cooperating to protect their older friends. Karen watched from the sidelines in growing frustration. Her carefully orchestrated plan to scare seniors into compliance had inadvertently spurred them to fortify their haven. If anything, they were more determined to personalize the courtyard and enjoy it safely. The last few holdouts who disliked clutter or excess decor found themselves overshadowed by an outpouring of support for the elderly. Meanwhile, rumors swirled that the dog had been lured inside intentionally. A few neighbors even speculated Karen might have had a hand in it, though no direct evidence surfaced. One evening, Karen sat in her living room, flipping through her binder of HOA rules. She fantasized about a last-ditch effort to block the fence, maybe referencing some arcane bylaw about uniform fences. But the board had already invoked an emergency safety provision that overrode most aesthetic guidelines. She realized, with a sinking feeling, that her scheme was truly done for. The seniors were about to get the most secure courtyard in Willow Glen's history. On a bright Monday morning, the hum of a pickup truck and the clang of metal signaled the arrival of Safe Glen Enclosures. 3 workers jumped out, unloading bundles of wrought iron sections, a posthole digger, and an array of tools. Larry Danforth and Ms. Connolly stopped by to greet them, distributing cups of coffee and going over final details. The seniors watched excitedly from their windows and porches, glad to see the promised safety measure come to life. First, the old waist-high fence that had previously delineated part of the courtyard perimeter was dismantled. Then the crew drilled deeper post holes for taller, sturdier posts. Within a day, the new fence began taking shape, elegant vertical bars with minimal spacing to prevent even small animals from squeezing through. A wide gate, set with a coded keypad at about chest height, was installed near the main walkway. On the inside, a robust push bar allowed easy egress. For several afternoons, volunteers helped shift benches and planters away from the fence line. Some seniors scurried around, offering water or snacks to the construction workers, who responded with good-natured banter. The courtyard momentarily looked chaotic, piles of soil, stacked pavers, but an undercurrent of optimism ran strong. People recognized that each clang of metal brought them closer to a safer, more private environment. During the installation, Eric Lynn and Teresa Glenn took photos for the Willow Glen newsletter, chronicling the Courtyard Security Initiative. They interviewed seniors about how they felt. Mildred Hawks, despite lingering fear from the dog episode, smiled at the camera, saying, "This fence is a blessing. We'll finally have peace of mind." Walter Pierce, leaning on his cane, joked, "I used to climb fences as a boy, but now I'm grateful I won't have to. The door code is just fine for me." Karen kept her distance, occasionally driving past and glancing with a scowl. She could see the fence rising higher each day, symbolic of the senior's new sense of security. Her chest twisted with resentment. No one consulted her aesthetic preferences. No one asked if the fence might clash. All that mattered was safety and the senior's happiness. The rest of Willow Glen seemed to stand firmly behind this project. By the end of the week, the fence and gate were complete. The Safe Glen crew tested the keypad lock, handing a small slip of paper to Larry Danforth with the initial 4-digit code. Larry, in turn, distributed it discreetly to the senior residents. The code was easy enough for them to memorize, but not so simple that any random stranger could guess. A sign was placed on the gate reading, "Private Courtyard, authorized residents and guests only," along with a phone number for caretaker inquiries. With a new enclosure established, Willow Glen seniors breathed a collective sigh of relief. They could reclaim their courtyard, set out chairs, or chat by the koi pond without fear of another canine intrusion or any other unexpected threat. Many recognized it as an ironic outcome. The dog scare, orchestrated or not, had spurred them to unite and protect their space more effectively than ever. As luck would have it, just a few days after the fence's completion, the stray dog reappeared near Willow Glen Estates. Late one afternoon, Sylvia Tan, a longtime resident, spotted it skulking along the main road, apparently scavenging again. She quickly alerted the neighborhood watch, who tried to keep tabs on it while contacting animal control. The dog eventually wandered near the senior courtyard area. Mildred Hawks, sitting on a shaded bench inside the newly enclosed space, spotted it through the wrought iron bars. Her heart pounded for a moment, the memory of that terrifying afternoon still fresh. But this time, her fear was tempered by a sense of security. The dog might snarl or approach, but had no path inside. The locked gate presented an impassable barrier, and the fence's iron bars were too narrow for the dog to squeeze through. Sure enough, the dog slunk up to the fence, sniffed around, and let out a few low growls. It even pawed at the ground near the gate. Mildred watched from a safe distance. A couple of other seniors joined her, each holding phones in case they needed to call for help. But the dog, failing to find a way in, eventually trotted off, disappearing down the street. Moments later, the animal control officer arrived, searching in vain. The dog had once again slipped away. Yet the seniors felt a surge of relief and triumph. They had just witnessed the fence doing exactly what it was meant to do, protect them. If the dog tried the same stunt as before, it wouldn't breach their sanctuary. Word spread swiftly. "The fence works." That dog came back but couldn't get in. The success story buoyed the neighborhood's spirits, reinforcing that the investment in the coded enclosure was worth every penny. Karen heard about the dog's failed visit from a neighbor's text and felt a conflicting pang of frustration. Her initial plan, to sow fear, had instead led to a near fortress for the seniors. If she'd harbored any notion that a second dog intrusion might undo them, that idea was now dashed. The courtyard was more protected than ever, and the seniors were likely to keep enjoying their shared space, personal decorations and all. Moreover, quiet rumors about possible sabotage had persisted. Though no one had proof, multiple neighbors privately suspected Karen's involvement. She'd been so vocal about the courtyard's clutter and dissatisfaction with the seniors. The presence of meat scraps during the dog's initial incursion seemed suspicious. Some residents even recalled seeing Karen's SUV near the west edge of town around that time, though it was purely circumstantial. Sensing her reputation on shaky ground, Karen tried to fade into the background of Willow Glen affairs. But it was too late. The entire fiasco had prompted a wave of sympathy for the senior block and a heightened awareness of potential sabotage. People were more vigilant, more united in their stance that the older residents deserved freedom from intimidation. With each day that passed, the fence's existence became a symbol of the community's triumph over that ephemeral wave of cruelty. In the weeks following the fence's completion, Willow Glen Estates settled into a gentler rhythm. Spring blossomed fully, painting the courtyards with vibrant tulips and daffodils. The seniors, once shaken by the dog's intrusion, reclaimed their space with renewed joy. Mildred Hawks arranged potted flowers in a neat row by the koi pond. Flowers that once might have drawn Karen's disapproval, but now blossomed behind secure iron bars, beyond the meddlesome gaze of any saboteur. Walter Pierce, feeling safer than ever, took longer walks around the courtyard each morning, leaning on his cane but smiling at neighbors. Teresa Glenn hosted small get-togethers by the fountain, inviting younger families to visit as well, distributing the gate code to trusted guests. The arrangement worked seamlessly. If you belonged or had legitimate reason to enter, you knew the code. Otherwise, the gate remained locked, deterring stray animals or prying troublemakers. As for the vicious dog, animal control eventually managed to trap it near the drainage ditch after repeated sightings. It was taken to a shelter for evaluation. Some rumored that it might be too aggressive for easy adoption, but at least it would no longer roam free, threatening unsuspecting neighbors. A mix of relief and sadness accompanied the news. Few truly hated the dog, recognizing it had been neglected or abandoned. But the immediate threat was resolved, bringing closure to the courtyard scare. Karen's influence waned drastically. The suspicion around her role in the dog's infiltration never hardened into formal accusations. There was no conclusive proof. But her name became synonymous with hostility toward the senior block. She lost clout with the HOA board, which restructured the volunteer liaison roles, effectively sidelining her. Feeling resentful and ostracized, she retreated, no longer eager to patrol with her binder of rules. Indeed, her attempts to protest the fence or the newly placed benches fell on deaf ears. Willow Glen had decided the seniors' well-being mattered more than any petty aesthetic concerns. Yet, the community's spirit blossomed. The memory of that near tragedy had forged a deeper sense of solidarity. People across the neighborhood recognized that caring for the vulnerable was a moral responsibility, not just a nice gesture. The successful fencing project, complete with coded locks, became a shining example of neighbors uniting against fear and aggression. Over time, visitors praised the courtyard's design, calling it both secure and welcoming. Some said it was the loveliest spot in Willow Glen, a garden oasis for the golden years. On a warm afternoon in mid-May, the seniors arranged a modest thank you party in the courtyard, inviting the entire community. A local guitarist strummed gentle tunes. Long tables offered homemade cookies, fruit punch, and a big sheet cake that read, "Grateful for our safe haven. Thank you, Willow Glen." Younger residents mingled with older ones. Kids giggled by the koi pond and the newly installed lead fence glinted in the sunlight, standing as a silent sentinel. Mildred Hawks took a moment to address the crowd, her voice trembling with emotion. To everyone who helped build this fence, who insisted our courtyard should remain ours, I can't thank you enough. A few weeks ago, we were terrified. Now, thanks to your compassion, we feel safer than ever. This is what a true neighborhood does. Protect each other. Applause rippled through the courtyard, echoing off the iron bars that signified both security and togetherness. Even those who once dreaded change found themselves smiling, seeing how a crisis had led to the best in people. Eric Lynn, who had once chased off the dog with a broom, clinked cups with Walter Pierce. Teresa Glenn served slices of the celebratory cake. Laughter and conversation filled the air. Karen was notably absent. No one saw her at the gathering, though a few glimpsed her watching from a distance, standing by the street. If she felt regret or longing to be part of it, she gave no outward sign. She simply turned and walked away, leaving the courtyard to the community that had bonded in defiance of her cruel scheme. Thus, Willow Glen Estates moved forward, forging a legacy of empathy over intimidation. The seniors, freed from the specter of the stray dog, enjoyed their courtyard more than ever. The new fence and coated locks became not a barrier, but a symbol of collective will, a testament to how neighbors can unite to shield the most vulnerable from harm. And in that cherished courtyard, the koi pond sparkled, benches blossomed with potted blooms, and gentle laughter replaced the echoes of fear, ushering in a happy ending that transcended any meddling Karen could have imagined.